Good morning. We're going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. Just FYI, the Citizens Advisory Committee does not yet have a quorum, so we're going to move through the agenda without some of the action items until we hopefully will have a quorum for the CAC. So Bob, I guess we start with the discussion regarding the tentative 5-year work program.
This is listed as a separate agenda item. First up, something we do every year. Lorena will be reviewing the projects that are recommended for inclusion in the upcoming 5-year work program. We do have a copy of materials that list those projects that Lorena will be going through. And just by the way, those of you who may have noticed her name tag is not Lorena Valencia anymore. Oh. She is now Lorena Cusick. Congratulations.
Thank you.
But her email is still the same. The DOT.
I'm working on that. Technology has a way of lagging behind DOT. We're ready? Okay. Good morning, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and present the 5-year work program. Okay, this is a list of projects that provides us direction on what, where, and how to build the projects in your community for the future. The development of the work program is the extensive coordination between local governments and transportation planning organizations along with DOT, with cities and county officials in urbanized areas. The transportation planning organization needs and develops transportation plans. I'm going to present a video that's going to give you a little more explanation, and then we'll go get into the projects.
These are pictures from Palm Bay.
Transportation. Getting for school or just across town could be a major challenge in earlier days. As towns and cities grew, the challenges for transportation planners increased, calling for creative solutions. Between 1960 and 2002, Florida went from being the 10th most populous state to the 4th most populous state in the U.S. In the decade of the 1990s alone, Florida's population increased 23.5%. Some project that by 2050, Florida's population could double the 2000 census numbers. All of this growth has had an impact on our economy, environment, transportation efficiency, and the quality of our lives. Moving people and goods effectively is becoming an increasingly difficult challenge. If we only think in terms of roads, cars, and trucks, clearly we are reaching critical mass, and we cannot afford to lose the battle for better transportation. This is why the Department of Transportation sees its mission in the context of a broad spectrum of transportation solutions, which include a multimodal and facilities approach. The 5-year work program is one of the department's methods of achieving its goals. The work program identifies what transportation facilities will be developed in each successive 5 years. Transportation facilities includes transit, recreational, trails, airports, seaports, and spaceports, as well as highways. The work program provides a structure for developing transportation projects in a phased approach from planning to construction. As they move through the work program, projects are developed to reflect the department's goals, local priorities, financial limitations, and production constraints. It is important that the work program contain a balance of pedestrian, bicycle transit, rail, airport, spaceport, seaport, and roadway projects. times, non-vehicular modes of transportation are emphasized. Since the goal is to improve the movement of people and goods throughout the state, various project types are considered each year. Some common examples are projects to improve airport and seaport access, rail improvements, enhancement of overland freight routes used by the trucking industry, roadway alignments, and intermodal connections. Across the spectrum of projects, land use and economic impacts are weighed. FDOT works hard to balance the best overall decisions for the area. Transportation planning has always been driven by the need for moving people and goods, and by the needs of local people. Involvement and input from the local citizens and planning organizations is also a critical part of developing the 5-year work program. Because there are so many factors and voices to be heard in the process, transportation development takes time. There is much more involved behind the scenes than most people realize. Metropolitan and transportation planning organizations identify specific transportation needs in urbanized areas. The MPOs and TPOs, comprised of elected officials throughout the region, are designated official transportation planning agencies by federal law. In non-urbanized areas, the County Commission, along with input from local citizens, identifies, proposes, and evaluates alternate solutions to meet transportation needs. Since transportation needs usually exceed the available funds, the project list must be prioritized in order to fit the budget. This is called the MPO and TPO Cost Feasible Plan. Projects are ranked based on their importance to the community, and the prioritized list is then given to the Department of Transportation. Roads, bridges, and transportation improvements dramatically change the face of our country. The speed of change left some feeling like it happened overnight. Throughout the planning process, great care is taken to involve the public in identifying needs and evaluating project alternatives. Coordinating with local governments, other agencies, and the public, the department updates its tentative 5-year work program with projects that reflect local priorities. Then the work program is balanced financially. New priority projects are nearly always added in the new 5th year of the work program, ensuring that the financial balance is maintained in the first 4 years of the program. The current or first year of the plan drops out, and the new 5th year will add on. Each year, the program is dynamically revised, creating a new 5-year work program. However, due to funding, all of the prioritized projects cannot be included. The work program must be financially balanced with the allocated state and federal dollars. Though the department is heavily involved in planning for all modes of transportation, it is not the lead agency responsible for improvements for airports, seaports, spaceports, rail, and transit facilities. Airport and transit authorities take the lead for their respective facilities. The department plays a significant role in helping finance these facilities through the administration of state and federal grants and other financial assistance. For projects related to the state highway system, the department is the responsible agency. Each year brings a new budget for the work program. Sometimes revenue projections come in lower than what the department estimated, and the department has to defer or move out projects from the program. Defer means that a project phase is moved to a later year within the 5-year work program cycle. Moved out means that a project phase is moved out of the work program cycle to a future year. The work program uses a 6-phase production process for developing each project. south in a hurry before adequate planning and foresight were factored in. Many aspects of the planning process lead to a project being prioritized for the work program. Input from local agencies, local citizens, and the department lead to a range of project alternatives and their advantages and disadvantages. The planning phase determines the scope, schedule, and budget of alternatives to be programmed. The department studies the variety of environmental, economic, social, and historical impacts a project may have on the community. The PD&E phase can take 18 to 24 months for each project. If there is significant public opposition or extreme environmental impacts, the project may never be implemented. Public involvement is critical during this phase of the project. Community meetings and public workshops are typically held to allow citizens to participate. The PD&E phase concludes with a public hearing and the selection of a preferred alternative. Once a preferred project alternative is determined, the design phase begins. During design, all the features and required information for the project are detailed. Surveys, engineering drawings, architectural plans, drainage, relocation of power lines, realignments, every aspect needed for construction is completed in the design phase. Typically, the design phase takes 1 to 2 years to complete. Now, don't get any wild ideas here, but those early transportation planners were really thinking outside the box. Obviously, finding room for roads was a challenge for them too. Right-of-way essentially means acquiring the land, property, or space required for a project. The right-of-way process begins with the preparation of property appraisals, which develop a fair market value for the areas being acquired. Right-of-way agents then negotiate with property owners and/or their representatives to acquire the properties. The acquisition process also includes the functional areas of relocation and property management. Relocation is a federally mandated program to make sure displaced owners are treated fairly when reestablishing their residences or businesses. This phase can take 2 years or longer to complete. After all the planning, design, public input, and right-of-way, a project is ready for construction. For those impacted by the construction process, the best part of the construction is when the project is finished. As we all know, the actual process of construction can be frustrating at times for travelers and adjacent property owners. Safety concerns, reduced speeds, lane closures, entryway obstructions, and travel delays are likely to occur during this phase. The department works hard to make the process as smooth as possible. After the dust settles and the orange cones are removed, a new facility, roadway, or trail exists, improving transportation efficiency. Soon, people forget the old problems that were hindering them before. Once a project is completed, it still needs to be maintained for years to come. The department oversees a variety of maintenance activities, from repaving to improving guardrails, signage, mowing, sweeping, and restriping. Ah, the good old days. We look back with affection, nostalgia, and gratefulness for air conditioning and paved roads. If you've been adding up the years of the phases as we went along, you already know that a project can easily take 6 to 10 years from planning through construction. Because the work program process involves the local public in all phases, projects reflect local priorities and needs. The public is invited to provide input early on, when city and county commissions and metropolitan planning organizations are identifying needs and establishing priorities. The public is also invited to participate in various local meetings held for individual projects as they move through the phases. We hope this video has given you a better understanding of the FDOT work program and how important everyone's role is in improving Florida's transportation system.
don't have as much money this year as we had in previous years. So the next few projects that I have are the ones that we were able to program. The first 5 are related to the parkway. Okay, the first one is the Ellis Road from John Rhodes to Wickham.
Excuse me, Lorraine is referring to the handout here that was presented.
Yeah. Does that feel okay on the top? So you can follow me. Okay, this project was programmed, we did the right-of-way phase on this, and it has, due to the extensive amount of this project, we had to phase it out in several years. Okay, between 2020 and 2023 for approximately $35 million for the right-of-way phase. This number may change depending on how Brevard County's design and drainage analysis goes. We may need more, we may need less. It's not fully funded for right-of-way at this point, according to the PD&E schedule. But Brevard County's design plan may change that. The next project is the St. John's from US 192 to I-95. As you may recall, earlier this year we programmed from south of Palm Bay city limits to US 192. Now we're programming the other segment to connect up to the interchange in fiscal year 17 to tie in to the construction of the interchange. And that was a TRIP project, so we were able to program $3.1 million, which is matched by the county. The next project is another leg of the St. John's Heritage Parkway, which is from somewhere tied into west of the I-95 in Ellis, north to Washingtonia, whether it ends in Pineda, closer. We still have to figure out what the alignment is on that project and where it's going to end. We don't have a logical termini for that one yet. But at least we got it in, and that one's going in to fiscal year 2020, again, for $2 million from the state and $1.5 million from the county. The next project is the widening project of Malabar Road and Palm Bay Parkway from the Minton Road to the Parkway. Okay, this is an environmental phase. We're proposing that in 2020 for approximately $500,000. This is also a TRIP funds, and it is a match by the city. The next project is Babcock from Palm Bay Parkway to Malabar Road. This is the design phase, and it's being proposed in 2020 for $1.5 million. And this is also a TRIP project with a match of 1.5 from the state. Now these two projects, Babcock and Malabar, also tie into the parkway. It'll be interesting to see how the numbers will change in the traffic study once Palm Bay's portion opens up. Okay, next project is, as you're aware, the TPO is handling a feasibility study on US 192, and they have been working on the intersections of Wickham and Hollywood. We're still ironing out the numbers of Wickham, so we weren't able to program anything on that project, but we were able to do the right-of-way phase for the Hollywood and Evans and US 192 intersection. That project, we put $4.7 million in fiscal year 2020 on that project. And then to tie in on Hollywood, which is the county's portion, we were able to provide them $3.3 million of TRIP funds in order for them to finish acquiring their right-of-way on that segment of the road. The next projects are two CIS facilities. As you may be aware, the central office was doing a study. It's number 9 or number 10 on your priority list. It was a study on State Road 404. Out of that study, we have 4 intersection improvements, which are the next 2 projects. The intersections improvement will be 405 and Sison Road, 405 at 50 at Barnett Avenue, and Grissom Avenue. And these are programmed for design in 15 and through 2020 for design and construction. The next project we have is the Vieira Interchange. The construction of that project is being programmed in fiscal year 2017 for $7.3 million. Next we have the the next 3 projects are the 528 widening project. They are from the beach, east of the beach line, the beach line east from west of 995 to Industry Road, and then from west of 524 Industry Road to east of State Road 3, and then from east of State Road 3 to Fort Canaveral. Those three projects were programmed in fiscal years 2016 for in design, and that was the only thing that we're doing on those three projects. Then we have the trail projects. We still have the sea loop that's currently in PD&E. We weren't able to do anything on that one. We don't have a LDCA on that one as well. We have the Space Coast Trail project from State Road 406, and which is near the Maxborough Causeway. That was currently in a feasibility study in fiscal year 15, and then we're going to program the project development and environmental phase in 17 for approximately $450,000, and the preliminary engineering design phase in fiscal year 2019 for approximately $800,000 on that one. We have no constructions for that project, no construction funds for that project at the current time. Also, we have another Space Coast Trail. It's from Maxborough Bridge to the Atlantic Ocean. That will be the final segment of the coast-to-coast trail that goes from St. Pete all the way to the Atlantic Ocean. On that project, which is the last segment, which is approximately 7.8 miles, the project PD&E for project development and environmental phase is being proposed in fiscal year 2016 for approximately $430,000. And then design, which is partially funded in 2018 for $800,000, and it's estimated that another $5 million is going to be needed to complete the design of that trail. Our work program public official hearing is tomorrow at 6:30 in the evening. Our DeLand location at 719 South Woodland Boulevard. You can attend by going there, or you can go log on to our website, which is www.d5wph.com/2014, and you'll be able to view it as a webinar. So you don't have to leave the location, you can just sign on the computer. We have a 10-day after tomorrow, 10 days public comment period. You can go to the website, you can submit your comments through the website, or if you attend the public hearing, then you have comment cards that you can go ahead. You can also send letters to Noran Downs, or send her an email at norandowns.dot.state.fl.us. And of course, all of this work program is tentative for the 5 years. We have to wait for the Transportation Commission holds their meeting on March 2nd, 2015 in Tallahassee at the Burns Building. And after they, the commission is hearing the work program, they were recommended to submit to the governor, to the legislature for funding approval of the work program in July 1st of 2015. Any comments? Oh, there was one thing I wanted to add. The projects along A1A, we're still working on those projects. We have not finalized the right-of-way alignment on those projects. It's been such a long time. We've had a lot of maps that have not been updated in a long time, so there was an extensive amount of work to be able to get the correct alignment on that. So hopefully, next cycle, we'll be able to program some of those projects on that way. However, we've been working with John Adair on the portions that connect to his Complete Streets project, Minuteman, to try to tie in and do some of the improvements that have been going around on the A1A projects, to include it in our portions of the A1A project that we're doing, the resurfacing project. So we're doing some of that, and we're as projects come along, we'll try to tie in what we can so we can actually program. One of the priorities is try to look for the 520 intersection on A1A, but we don't have all the proper alignment or consensus on what to do on that project, because there's pedestrian refuge that needs to be there, so we're working on it. But as always, like I always tell you, I may not have all the money now, but as money comes available, I'll try to program everything I can. Questions?
Yeah, question, on A1A, are you, the resurfacing project north of State Route 500, are you slowing that down, or it's still programmed for fiscal year 16?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
that's,
Yes, we were able to add a little bit of funds of that in order to go ahead and include it in the design
even
process.
though the mapping issues and all that
Yeah.
stuff, that's not going to slow it down.
The one that already mentioned was effective December 19th, meeting.
The December, is tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
What's tomorrow, 8, 9, December 9th. Any other questions? No, the December 19th is when we have to have the comment period on that, so.
Just want to bring up City of Cocoa and their concern with State Route 524. PD&E, I know it was in, it was out, and now there's been some development with the port, their development project, possibly with a container
Right.
section there. Yes, I'd like to bring it up. Yes, there was a vote in court, a 3-2 vote to purchase the property and move ahead.
Yeah, I've already made the project manager on that meeting aware of that. So they're aware of it. So they'll take all that into consideration when they start the PD on that one.
All right, well, does there need to be a separate PD&E for 524 from industry to 95/520?
When they start this, they'll run the numbers again on the traffic counts and simulate it and see if they need additional, whether we need to extend it or have a separate one, will be determined at
And
that
to
time.
get added to the 5-year work plan, it's one time a year, so we missed this year and have to wait till next year.
If we have to do a new PD&E, yes, it's going to have to go back on the priority list for that segment of it, and then we can program something on it.
Looking at Project O, and that $5 million price tag to design the trail, that's about $800,000 a mile for a trail. Is that an accurate number?
It's approximate, we don't know until we start the PD&E process, we won't know true numbers.
I mean, golly, it's almost like you're going to granite to do the survey to get that number that high.
Well, and there's also several
We know what it-
agencies
yeah,
involved.
we know what it looks like, and we know you're going through federal land, and when that happens, your paperwork triples. And we're talking a trail, you know, hey, you've got the beeline from Industry Road to the port for less money than that.
I know. But that's what the study is, to determine what we
I was
need.
wondering, it just jumped out, that
Yes.
it was a trail.
Yes, is it to me?
You too, huh?
Yes, that does seem high. And that's a number that,
Bill?
Lee, do you know, I'm pointing to you.
I have not heard that number before. So.
I've not heard that number before either. It does seem high for just the design phase. It's almost like a construction number.
I know.
I request that we get some backup on that to see where that estimate
That's
came
why
from.
we're doing the study first. We're doing the study first, feasibility study,
Yeah.
and then we'll be able to determine and iron out those numbers.
Okay.
As soon as we have a little more information on the study, then I'll go ahead and.
The study is going to be extremely complex because we're dealing with environmental impact requirements from 3 different federal agencies, and they're different. So we have the Wildlife Refuge, we have Canada National Seashore, plus KSC, all have different details in their environmental requirements, so it's going to be a very complex study. But it's worth, and I'm going to ask Lee to talk about what the Wildlife Refuge has in mind on this. This is new information, I think, for our group. You may want to just kind of explain some of the discussions that you've had with the land managers on the federal properties. So you give a context of what this is about.
NASA and the Wildlife Refuge have proposed an off-road route that would be rail with trail through most of the Kennedy Space Center property. So we really thought it was going to be an on-road route because of the environmental impacts, but they've actually proposed an off-road route. So there's actually 4 federal agencies that we have to do the PD&E for because US DOT ultimately would be the funder. So one of the things to remember is that anything we spend on this segment of the trail from the Maxburg Bridge east would be federal funding because it's on federal land, it would not be state or local money.
The Wildlife Refuge is actually considering using this east-west component as a spine and then have other trails looping off of it to form a whole trail system throughout the Wildlife Refuge, which they've not had before, which I think will really offer a significant attraction in the Wildlife Refuge. And I'm not sure about the National Seashore, if it's same philosophy applies to them, but this is the beginning of a much more extensive access to the Wildlife Refuge than has been the case previously.
The Wildlife Refuge already has in their budget to build a new visitor center. So there will be a trail from where you go across the causeway south and around, and it'll come up to the new visitor center. There'll be a northern route north of the railroad tracks, a triangle. And then they're also looking for funding for a gateway feature. You know, right now it doesn't look like a national park. You know, when you go to other national parks, they have big rock entrances that say you're entering a wildlife refuge. They don't have that now. It looks more like a NASA facility with, you know, signs that say don't ride a bike, don't drive too fast, you know, gates and that, all kinds of stuff. So they're looking at introducing a gateway feature as part of this trail planning as well. So there are lots of really exciting plans for that trail.
I had some questions about Project A, B, and C, which are all the St. John's Heritage. But Bob, I guess my first question is to you. We're just seeing this for the first time. Do you have some feedback? Is this the first glance you've had as compared to what you anticipated? Are things slipping here that, because I'm trying to recall everything that we've been doing and now what's being proposed for the Ellis Road. Let's use that as an example. You know, we're talking right of way from 2020 to 23. And that ain't, by your media presentation, that right of way I don't think is going to be a 2-year project.
No.
And you have sort of broken that out, anticipating it's going to be a difficult right of way project. So in reality, you could have potentially 5-7 years of right of way in a construction that, you know, I mean, am I being wrong in looking at, you know, what Project A is referencing here? That
I'll let
it could be
Lorraine,
late
Lorraine
20s?
go, and then I'll make her comments, and I'll pick
Okay.
up.
Well, you have to remember, Brevard County right now is doing the design phase of the Ellis Road
Because
project.
of the drainage.
Right. And
Right.
based on what the results of that drainage analysis, it may be determined that we don't need that much right of way, and we can build it within a limited amount of right of way acquisition. So that's what we're waiting for. But I didn't want to lose the opportunity to fund it like we were going to purchase it all over a multiple year process, because it is $35 million. And that's not something we can acquire all at once. It will take several years. But we're waiting on the result of the Brevard County design in order to move forward.
Okay, so I'm just trying, the whole area there, I'm trying to visualize. So you've got an interchange that you're going to build in 2017. So we're going to have from Minton Road, John Rhodes, you will have that connection from John Rhodes and Ellis.
To the
That'll
interchange.
be part of the interchange.
Right.
So all that'll be new and functioning but you'll still have that old section of Ellis Road potentially for another 10 years before you get that piece finalized in a new widening portion to the airport.
That might
Is
be
that reasonable or
the worst case scenario.
worst case scenario?
But Brevard County is doing a lot of work in order to minimize the amount of time that we use requiring the right of way for that project.
And Bob, you
I too,
comfortable with that?
when we were pleased this time that the district was able to develop a draft tentative work program. Maybe we finally saw some specifics probably about 10 days ago. And we have had discussions both with county staff, TPO staff, and district staff. There were a couple of options or choices. If we do this, can we do that? You have the match for this. And so we have very close coordination with the county on this. And there's two specific points I wanted to make. First of all, I too said, what? Right-of-way for Ellis in fiscal year '22? And Lorraine, again, as she always does, reminds me, the important thing on right-of-way is to have it in the work program, because things can be advanced. If it's in the program to begin with, it can be advanced. You could consider this a placeholder. There is a program for advanced right-of-way acquisition, depending on cash flow, that the department can buy it now and pay itself back in that out year, so you can take advantage of opportunity buys, let's say, or willing sellers, and there are some of those that we are aware of along Ellis, but you've got to have the money in the program first before you're not in the game. Okay, so just because it's in those out years, I think the important point is not necessarily the year, but its presence in the work program, even beyond the 5 years. That sets it up for advanced right-of-way acquisition as cash is available. Okay, so
Yeah, that's one of the first things that we do when we look at the work program is what could we advance? If we're not in the mentality that we have to defer or move projects out, if we have enough cash flow, the first thing we do is what could we advance? What projects are ready to be moved in? When all those are moved in, then we program the outer years.
we've also...
Is this still, is it now CIS road?
No, because the
Still not.
PD&E is still not approved, and, well, it's still not approved. Until it's approved, the interchange design is on hold. The Ellis design can only go to a certain point, and the CIS designation cannot occur. And we're still having issues with Federal Highways interpretation of certain environmental regulations that's causing this situation.
You don't want to elaborate on
No. The other point I want to make, and Lorena mentioned TRIP, stands for Transportation Regional Incentive Program. It's not something we've heard a lot about recently because there hasn't been a lot of money in the program. The TRIP money, as well as another program that we'll be hearing more about called SIGPs, the County Incentive Grant Program, CIGP. Both of those are matching programs, 50-50. And the state share comes from documentary stamp tax proceeds. The doc stamp proceeds have been so depressed that there was no funding really for those programs for a long time. Now there is. So because, for instance, in the case, a little, and Lorena's been, she put on her elbow pads and went in the room there and got us TRIP and SIGP money for sections of the Parkway, for Malabar Road West, and for Badcock South. Those are all matching programs. And the problem, though, it's a matching program. That means the local government has to have the money. That's been a problem for the county. We couldn't participate in this program because we didn't have the local money. Now on the Parkway, there's 18+ million of county funds that are already on the parkway that we can use now to match and leverage trip money, which extends the amount of local money we have to go for things that can't otherwise be done with, or better done with local funds than with state or federal. So we had to work through all these machinations, and do we have match? And City of Palm Bay, shouldn't ignore that. Palm Bay was involved in these discussions too, because the South County roads are of high interest to them. So your answer is, it's good that we had this in advance so we could work through a program and maximize the dollars that was available to us. Thank you, Lorraine, for a good job.
But it doesn't mean that my boxing gloves are off and I'm not still looking for funds. I still have till the end of the 19th to see if there's anything left over that I can program on something else. Doesn't look like it, but I'll keep trying. And through the year, throughout the year, as funds, projects get closed out and money is released, sometimes we have money in current year that we can program a smaller project. And that's always what I'm looking out for. Any other questions?
Just to follow up on the CIS issue, I mean, it appeared to me that because of the advancement of that road to CIS status opened it up to a great deal of funding that was not otherwise available, in which the governor, I think, has a great deal of influence on. I mean, because of this, are we at jeopardy in not participating in some of those fundings that seem to be advanced through economic, I mean, I'm just curious.
Well, we did in April, we were awarded, I don't know, $40 million or something of that nature for construction of the interchange.
Right.
Clearly indicated a high level of interest and recognition of that. There's also $15 million for right-of-way associated with it. So there's $55 million that's been allocated this year on the interchange, which is not a small amount of money, Bob. So let's not lose fact of what's going on. And then plus now another 40 for right-of-way. That's $95 million.
But it didn't require
This year.
CIS to get those funds.
I think that the understanding is, the recognition is, the CIS designation is coming.
Okay.
It's just a matter
That's
of
all I was-
working through the
We're
federal
not losing.
bureaucratic stuff to get there. I did a quick tally in my head, and the state and federal participation on the entire parkway, including the south interchange, north interchange, everything is at least $125 million. That's come together in like the last 3 years. So we've been making a lot of progress.
With the local match of,
There's some local money, and the local money is important because it shows the commitment of the local area to a project. And without that, it's harder to get the big dollars. So it's always prudent to put some local money in at the beginning to kick it off, and that leverages then, shows intent and commitment, and leverages the state and federal.
thank you.
Excellent, and it's exciting to see some of the projects coming into the work program and all the advancements you've been able to do, so appreciate your effort. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm also trying to finish the projects that are already started and get them fully programmed and not just have them hanging around for years and years. Just finish them and move on to new projects. They're just as important.
Thanks. Okay, do we know if we have a quorum on the CAC yet?
No.
We do not, okay. All right, so we'll move on to approval of the minutes from the TAC only, September 8th and October 6th. Is there a motion from the TAC regarding those minutes? Motion by Mr. Cloutier, second by Ms. Lamb. Any comments, questions, corrections on the minutes? Okay, if not, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Next, we'll move on to the Space Coast TPO report. Bob?
Okay, item 4, the TPO actions. The TPO met in October. We did not have a November meeting, as you know. The TPO authorized the TPO to coordinate the application for a quiet zone. We had full commitment and agreement from the jurisdictions. I think it was 6 affected jurisdictions from Cocoa South to the county line, South County line, all agreed to cooperate and participate with TPO. At the TPO meeting, Mayor Meehan volunteered the City of Melbourne to act as the lead agency for the application. That's important. There must be a jurisdiction that actually owns and operates and has legal responsibility for grade crossings, has to actually be the applicant. And then other cities can piggyback on that application, and the TPO will be working with the cities to file the necessary paperwork. What we are waiting on now are the design plans from Aalborg, Florida, on what is proposed to be, what they propose to implement and install at the different grade crossings. We were told that those will be coming in December. We've requested an update or clarification on, is this coming tomorrow or is it delayed? We're coming up on the holidays, and I just wanted to have a sense of what the workload may be in reviewing those design plans in this particular time period. And Lee, to my knowledge, we haven't heard back on that. We asked about a week ago on it, and we've still not heard back on what their anticipated fine line schedule is to get those to us. So I'm telling you all the same thing. We don't have any additional information on when they're going to be coming. So anyhow, the TPO will be coordinating the quiet zone application, and the next big step is to review the design plans when we get them. We also had at the agenda at the meeting 3 Aalborg, Florida related resolutions that were requested by Commissioner Infantini. After a lengthy discussion on all 3, the Commissioner decided to withdraw the 3 items because she recognized from the comments of the other members that there were still discussions in progress and additional discussions with on specific points with Aalborg, Florida that could be made prior to the adoption of those resolutions. So she decided to withdraw them. So there were no action on those resolutions. The TPO also approved a legislative agenda, which you saw at the October meeting. We do have some additions, revisions to that agenda to present today that reflect some activities and developments that have occurred since October that are timely and appropriate to our legislative issues. So we'll cover that later on the agenda.
Comments or questions from the TAC? Seeing none?
Comments or questions from the CAC?
Thank you. Next on our agenda is the Bicycle Pedestrian Trails Advisory Committee report. Good morning, Georgiana.
Good morning. The Bicycle Pedestrian Trails Advisory Committee met on November the 11th, and you should have the minutes at your place for you to refer to. Well, the school day was October the 8th, and we had 39 schools to participate, so that was a success. Also, Ed Weaver from the City of Cocoa came to our meeting, and he discussed plans on filling in sidewalk gaps at several locations throughout Cocoa: Forest Avenue, Dixon Boulevard, and Bar Avenue. All of these areas are very important to make connections for pedestrians. Many of the residents rely on other forms of transportation other than auto, and these are very good projects. Funding is set aside in fiscal year 17-18 for construction, and this is one of the projects that qualify for transportation alternative funding through the TPO. Also, Grant Valcaria gave a presentation on an 8-foot multi-use sidewalk extension on Valcaria Road, and this will extend to Valcaria Park. This was a project that the residents have requested for some time now, and funding is set aside in fiscal year 17-18 for construction. And again, this was a project that Grant Valcaria applied for transportation alternative funding. Also, the city of Rockledge was awarded a recreational trails program grant for constructing 2 miles of a trail around Barton Park Lake. The construction of the trail should begin within the next few months, and the trail will be 12 foot wide and will be open to the public for a variety of activities. And finally, we also discussed with our committee the TPO's draft 2014 countywide annual safety report that we're doing. And the findings from the vulnerable road user section for that particular category, and that includes pedestrian, bicyclists, and motorcyclists. And basically, the analysis looks at crashes within the county between fiscal year 2009 and 2011. And the analysis also looks at crash severity, type, rate, and frequency. And basically, it's showing that crashes tend to occur on more higher volume roads, Palm Bay Road, State Road 520, A1A, US 1, and US 192. Now, this is still a draft report, and we're still in the process of reviewing it. But the whole purpose of this is basically we want to develop consistent analysis to be able to develop a list of priority projects, specific crash areas that we can go after state safety funding. And, to be able to go after that money, you have got to show countermeasures, performance measures, you have to show crash history. And so that's what ultimately we're after here. And so we will keep you posted on that. And any questions?
Kim Smith has made a point to staff, and I don't know if she's done it at the meeting here, about the proportion, the percentage of fatalities in the county that are pedestrian or bicycle. Of all the highway fatalities in the county so far, a third of them have been either pedestrians or bicyclists. A third, which is quite an alarming statistic. And I hope this isn't a trend that continues, but the number is very much up over what it used to be, both the number and the proportion of total fatalities.
You mentioned that the area sidewalk was for the 17th.
I'm sorry?
The minutes are saying 18, 19 years.
Okay, you know what, I believe that's correct. It is fiscal year 19.
Oh.
I apologize, that's my fault. That's correct. Yes.
Thanks, Georgina. Other comments or questions from the TAC? I'm seeing none.
Comments or questions from the CAC? Comment, you mentioned most, I think you said something, most of them were on major highways. Just personal comment, but that's where we seem to locate, our wide shoulders to ride on. So there's going to be, again, a natural, I think, association. That's where because you're placing those bicycle facilities directly adjacent to major roadways. I don't have an answer for it, but I can tell you as a bicyclist, they're the last places I go riding. If I've got local knowledge, and I know back roads, that's where I'm going to ride. But how do you address that in a public facility? I know all the problems with right-of-ways and, driveways and conflict points, I'm just saying. But whenever I can, I'm going to find something that's off those major roads, one, because it's quieter, there's less traffic, and generally more pleasurable. And, and it's probably safer in a lot of senses too, even though there are those other conflict points with driveways.
I think it might be interesting in that 1/3 for pedestrian fatalities to find out how many of those pedestrians were residents and how many were visitors. Because, like you said, most of us know how to get off the roads, but when you're visiting, you don't know that. And when you're renting bicycles, you're on major roadways. So it'd be interesting to find out the percentage of our local dispersals.
Yeah, I think that, let's make a note of that, Georgia. I think we need to look into that a little deeper. Is there a trend occurring here? Is it just an aberration, a statistical? You know, fatalities, particularly auto fatalities, tend to be randomly distributed. It's very difficult they don't happen that often given all the driving that's done. And very often, unless you're working at a state level, it's difficult to pinpoint cause and effect on fatalities. Bicycle and I think we need to look at that. I agree with you, and I think that's just one of the factors we need to look at. We need to look at, time of day, location, a whole range of things to see if there's something.
Safer for our visitors.
Well, yes, indeed.
And
Yes.
A1A specifically, big tourist spot. Yeah, it's a good point.
Yeah, ride a bicycle on those busy streets, have 3 feet of pavement inside Titusville city limits. The speed limit's 55 on 405. I don't feel safe doing it. I'm also on US 1, same thing, 3 foot of asphalt, speed limit 45, 50. I get to Highway 50 where they now have a bicycle lane. I feel a lot better because they're 5 foot for me to drive on. But when I'm on 405 in an urban setting and the speed limit is 55 miles an hour and I have 3 feet of asphalt, that's not a good combination.
No, that's not.
And if I get hit, I'll be free that's
Yes,
the
3 foot is not wide enough, absolutely.
and that's what we have.
The DOT standard is moving to 4 feet,
Well, it is 4 feet, but it's moving to 5 feet.
moving to 5 feet, okay. So some of those older roads, which are lucky in some cases even have a shoulder call.
Correct.
They do not meet current standards, you're correct.
Well, it's the mix. It's the high speed limit and the narrow bit of pavement and somebody's texting. And it doesn't take much. There's no reaction time when you're free. And that's why your fatality rate is so high.
George, I know we've got a few questions back from the TAC as well, so Mike and then Chris.
Just a question about, is there any comparison as far as statewide? I mean, eventually, if you're going to be,
You mean in our analysis?
I mean, is there going to be some type of relationship to a
There will be.
state?
There is a compared to state and
How we
national.
compare?
Not very good.
Okay, Laura said that there is a comparison state and nationally. We may need to look and see exactly how in depth it is, but very good points. Like I said, it is draft, and we are really going to dig into it and see where we need to kind of dig deeper in some specific categories.
In looking at the fatality information, is it going to identify whether any of those fatalities classically were in the wrong, in other words, were they on the wrong side of the street, not a big traffic signals, any of that kind of stuff? Yeah.
That's a separate analysis.
We had a discussion about that. I think at this point, we just have the data, that is where we're going to have to go deeper, look at, actually get the report and look deeper into it and see what you can actually get off the report.
And also, there's controversy.
Fortunately, though, the actual number is relatively small. So it shouldn't be too difficult to look through the data and kind of drill down on any trends. I know we had some issues with inebriated bicyclists, which generated a safety project down in Palm Bay with highway lighting. So it can be all sorts of things.
Sure,
So.
sure. So this is step one. So we have some data, and we're going to move on to it, look at it deeper. But we've got to get to this point where we can kind of dig into it and try to go after the safety plan. So this is something that we're doing on our own to be able to get some things funded and get into the DOT work program.
Any other questions from either the TAC or the CAC? Okay, thanks everybody. Georgiana, thank you very much. Next is our Transportation Disadvantaged Local Coordinating Board report. Bob? Jim?
Good morning. The local coordinating board met on November 17th. It was pretty much a routine business meeting, fixing all our bylaws talk about social media sites, point out the TPO's Twitter feed and how you get the news from there, provide some more information for our members. And also there is a grant opportunity available for agencies that serve folks that are elderly and or disabled. It's a federal program through the state where you can purchase vehicles for basically 10 cents on the dollar. You provide the 10% local match. The feds will provide 80% and the DOT will provide the other 10%. You know, if agencies looking for vehicles, the applications are due next month, just give me a call. I put our call DOT and I didn't write down the numbers, so give me the call because DOT will give you the run around there. Yeah, just call it the Tallahassee, try to ask. Item number, the second item I have for y'all is our January 15th is the Resolve to Rethink Your Commute Day. DOT has a commuter assistance program in District 5. They come over here, Brevard County, once every year. This is the second annual Rethink Your Commute Day. We're partnering up with Eastern Florida State College. The event will focus on transit as a commute option in Brevard County. It'll also have a focus on carpooling and manpooling. We'll have different items going on at each of the campuses throughout the county. There's some kind of a special event going on at the Melbourne campus. There'll be a bus ride-along. Invitations go out late December or middle of December for save the date, and then there'll be invitations. We're also timing it with the students as they're getting back and registering the classes to show them there's other ways to get to school than driving. And then last but not least, especially for all our municipality partners, we will not be offering bus service on Christmas and New Year's Day, and it will be shutting down at 6 p.m. on Christmas Eve and on New Year's Eve. But we'll be operating, the board has declared December 26th as a holiday. We'll be operating full service on that day. That's it. Any questions? I'll try to do the answer.
Comments or questions from the TAC? Yes, Jen?
I actually have a comment in the Rethink. The city of Melbourne just met with a representative from Rethink, and it's a really great program. I hadn't heard that much about it before, and I just sort of wanted to say that, that I think the January 15th event's a great event, but it's also a great program. They were even talking to us about maybe possibly coming in and launching a program with, because we are a fairly large employer, and seeing if we could do some ride sharing or doing together, and I just wanted to put a plug in for them, so I'm glad you brought them up.
Yeah, you described it way better than I could ever do.
Thank you. Anything else from the TAC? Okay, hearing none?
Comments or questions from the CAC? Seeing none?
Okay, thanks. Thanks,
Thank
Jake. Bob, regional coordination report?
Yeah, I've been talking for several months about the East Central Florida Corridor Task Force. That group had their last meeting in the middle of November, did issue a set of recommendations and went to the governor on December 1st. Those of you who picked it up have a handout here that just kind of gives some highlights. And not to go through this now, I have requested from the DOT and the others involved with staffing the task force for a presentation to this group and to the TPO in February. So we'll be hearing more about this, but it'll be generally about this material that you have before you today.
Thanks. Comments or questions from the TAC?
Comments or questions from the CAC? Seeing none?
Bob,
Bob, sorry.
I pulled this off the website, from the newsletter that you sent out, and it referenced it as a revised draft report.
Yeah, I looked at it the other day too, and I did not see the final, and I didn't have a chance at the time to follow up. And it was before December 1st, actually, when I looked at it, so I will check again and ask, where's the final?
Okay. So this may not be the final.
It's not going to change.
Okay.
No. Not after what it went through to get it where it was. Tess, they're not going to change a word.
Okay, the next item on our agenda is the 2015 TAC-CAC meeting calendar. I'd ask for a motion from the TAC to recommend approval of the calendar to the TPO. So
I'd also like to see if we want to talk about an
motion on the table. Any second?
Without the November.
May I ask your logic?
We didn't have one at the time, and we seem to have done it in the fall.
Well, what's the nature of the November election? Is that the one?
No election this year.
There's no election this year for anything, so we should, the conflict that we had this time was the difficulty in getting a quorum at the TPO when we're caught in this transition period between elections, city meeting to make appointments, and it's been our experience in the past that the TPO members themselves aren't sure if they're on or they're off, or if they need to attend or not. So, and our meeting would have been right in the middle of that organizational period that the cities have. So
We might have that again in 16.
we may have it in 16, but not in 15. So for the time being, if we could keep it on the calendar so it's there, if we find we don't need it, we can always cancel it. So I would request that we keep it there for just in case. The other point I'd like to make is call your attention to September. We again have a problem with the Labor Day holiday. We're suggesting that we meet on Tuesday rather than our normal Monday meeting in September.
Okay, so move the calendar as proposed.
Thank you. Ms. Wilbanks, second. Any comments, questions from the TAC? You want to check in with the TAC?
Comments or questions from the CAC?
Yeah, our meetings, they run late 95% of the time. Is there any reason we couldn't start at 9:30 a.m.? Just thought being out there. We're always running late.
Bob, you want to?
Means I have to get up earlier on Monday morning.
No sympathy here. Just throwing that out because we all know we have the tendency to run late and we stop agenda items because we are running late.
Yes.
And it's really a pain to try and get everything done, and that would leave an extra half hour of flexibility.
Okay. We have a few comments from the TAC, Ms. Wilbanks, and then Mr. Britton.
I personally would think it would be a good idea. I think that the fact that we do run over, and there are many times I've got enough thing that I have to do and get out of here into my town. And then I miss, like the last meeting, apparently you all announced that you weren't having a November meeting. I show up at the November meeting because it's on my schedule. And then I find out, nope, you didn't have it. Well, it must have been said at the end of the meeting. I think it's a great idea. A half hour is not going to kill anybody, I don't think. But it's certainly, except Bob. Well, I'm sorry, Bob. But I think really on a Monday morning for us to be pulled out anyway, to not have to tie up the whole afternoon and not know we're going to do that.
This came up several years ago, and there was a feeling on the part of, particularly when we had city manager types here at the meeting, that they wanted to be in the office first, see if there's any emergencies to take care of before they left. They wanted to be there first thing Monday morning to deal with anything. But, you know, now with emails and everything on your portable devices, you know Sunday evening, 11 o'clock, where there's something, there's a broken water line you gotta go deal with. You don't have to wait till Monday morning to find out. So, maybe that issue is not relevant anymore. That you all want to be in your office first thing Monday morning to deal with whatever's come up over the weekend.
Mr. Gordon, did you have a comment?
Well, I personally didn't feel like it, the meetings were rushed at the end. I mean, I can go either way, but I can understand city people, wanting to get in the office too, even though they do have smartphones and everything else. But my comment is, basically, meetings seem to end, 12, 12:05, 12:10. Don't go past that. But if nobody has schedule problems, I'd be all for coming in 9:30.
Would you like a show of hands or something?
Well, let's have a motion.
Okay.
Or can we do that even on the CAC? Even though the CAC, let's see what we got. Even though we don't have a quorum.
I'd be happy to amend my motion to be the calendar with meeting times to start at 9:30, to see where that goes.
Okay, sounds good. Ms. Wilbex, okay? All right, so we have a motion on the floor of the TAC. Why don't we get some input from the CAC?
Is there a motion from the,
Comments or questions for the CAC? 9:30 versus 10 o'clock. Anybody with a problem?
I'd rather do that.
All of the CAC members who are here have forfeited their opportunity to comment.
Okay, Mr. Griffin on the TAC?
Are we still gonna go ahead and shoot for, let's say, 11:30, and if we run to 11:45, 11:50, 12?
It has been my standing direction, and Sue's before me, that we put together an agenda that the TPO can cover in 2 hours. Okay? Now, you never know what's going to generate discussion and how long that discussion is going to be or what the level of public comment we may have. So there's always some uncertainty, but we try to do a 2-hour agenda. So, and frankly, there's a lot more question and answer and discussion at this group than there is at TPO on some of the items. So you all have a tendency to want to engage, and I think that's great, and I don't want to discourage that in any way.
So we're talking motion from 9:30 to 11:30, basically, and then if we run over, we run over.
I thought we were just leaving the time.
Yeah, I think the notion is we shoot for 11:30, and if we, more meetings that we can do that is better.
Okay, so my understanding of the motion on the floor is we are recommending that the TAC-CAC meetings start at 9:30. Is that correct? Okay. So all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Bob, what does that mean for the next meeting? Does that need to be approved by the TPO, or is this just your, can you implement that?
I'm looking at Laura, and she's shaking her head no.
We'll meet at 9:30 in February.
9:30 in February? Okay. So can we prepare a revised calendar, Carol, for Thursday that will then be distributed to everybody?
I'll have to check and
It should be, I think it should be, yeah. It's not in the bylaw, it's not in our policies or anything, meeting times, no. That's what I was thinking, is there something that we have to officially change?
I'll double check.
I don't think it should be. Okay. So February is 9:30.
All right, thanks, everybody. The next item on our agenda is the election of officers for the TAC. I would imagine the CAC would do that in February, given they don't have a forum today. We'll just handle the TAC today. And I'm sure many of you have read in the paper that I will no longer be with the city of Palm Bay as of Friday. And, you know, I think I sort of predicted this because I've been saying for years that as soon as we finish the Parkway, that it would be time for me to retire. Well, we're just about done. And so I wanted to say to all of you that, you know, I've worked with you both on the TAC as well as a TPO staff member years ago. And it's really been a great career for me to be a part of this and to be part of transportation in our community. So thank you all very much for all the support you've given me and all the time that you've given to making transportation system better in Brevard County. It's just been awesome. So thank you all very much. And with that, I'll entertain a nomination for chair of the TAC. Ms. Lamb.
Can I nominate Mr. Scott?
You certainly may. Thank you. Are there any other nominations? Okay. In that case, I would like a motion to close the nomination and elect Mr. Morgan by acclamation. Motion by Mr. Chenault, second by Ms. Wilbex. Any further comments, questions, TAC? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you very much. And now I'll entertain a nomination for vice chair. Mr. Morgan.
I'd like to nominate Jimmy Lamb.
Thank you. Any other nominations? Okay, with that, I'll ask for a motion to close the nominations and elect Ms. Lamb as vice chair by acclamation. Motion by Mr. Chenault, second by Ms. Wilbex. Any comments or questions, TAC? All in favor signify by saying aye. Okay, thank you. And at this point, I think I passed the gavel.
No.
No? Okay then.
Well, I'd be remiss if I didn't offer my testimonial to Sue's. I don't have anything planned here, and I don't know where to go with this. I've known Sue now for almost 30 years, both as a friend, as a colleague, and in a way she was my mentor early on. And, I learned a lot from her. There's times when I think she learned a lot from me, in a way, about how not to delegate until your staff is so overwhelmed they can't. Sue had a tendency to think of lots of things to do, and there were times when staff said, please, we can't breathe. So that's good. And I think looking back in your career, you were chairman here when we had the A1A widening situation. And the response that Sue developed in going to the district and saying, we need to do public involvement in a different way. We need to engage the public at the front end of the process and ask the public what they think ought to be done, rather than coming forward and saying, here's what we, the DOT, propose to do. That began with her. The way we do public involvement now on projects, really Sue initiated in the district. It took a while for it to become institutionalized, but of all the good things you did, Sue, from my point of view with this office, that's the one I look back on and pat you on the back for your courage in trying to change the battleship when it came to public involvement. So it's been just a pleasure working.
Thank you all so much. I would rather not cry here, so go ahead and move on. So thanks, everybody. Our next item on the agenda is the approval regarding resolution 15-15, a TIP amendment for FY15 through 19. Georgia?
All right, for the new members that we have here, I just want to let you know that the MPO or the TPO is required by the Code of Federal Regulations to develop a transportation improvement program. We refer to it as the TIP or the TIP. I may accidentally say that word, but it's something that we use a lot. And the TIP is a listing of transportation projects covering 5 years that is formally adopted by the TPO as part of the metropolitan planning process and required for projects to be eligible for federal funding. The TIP is updated annually, July of each year, and approved by the TPO and the Secretary. It is a reflection of the DOT's work program. They need to be consistent. The work program and the TIP should be very consistent in their projects and their funding. Throughout the year, amendments are needed. There could be a new project added into the work program, changes in the scope of work on a project, or an increase in funding, specifically if it's greater than $2 million. We will be required to do a TIP amendment. If you go to our website and you click on plans, and you click on TIP, you will see, you can click on that, see a listing of our TIP. You can actually go to our database with DTS and do searching of projects if you would like. But if you turn to page 28, the DOT has requested an amendment to our currently adopted fiscal year 15 through 19 TIP. And this is the listing of projects, and I'll run through them real quickly. Project 1 is Space Coast Area Transit. It's section 5339 bus and bus facilities. It's capital grant funding. And there are several years here, fiscal year 15, 16, 17, and 18. And basically, there is $3.1 million in FTA funding and $765,000 in matching funding and local funding. Project 2 is State Road 405 at Sisson Road. Lorena had mentioned this project when she presented the work program, it's intersection improvements. It's an addition of dual left lanes on State Road 405. This project came about, the SIS office, the DOT SIS office was doing a strategic intermodal system, SIS conductor study, and this was one of the projects that came out of that study. Project 3 is 5310 operating grant funding, and it's for the Space Coast Center of Independent Living. And fiscal year 15, there is funding set aside, basically a total of a little over $100,000. Project 4, this was Malabar Road from Babcock to US 1. Basically, the way it was entered into the work program, it is entered into, it says Babcock Road instead of Babcock Street. So that is a very, very minor update. I'm kind of surprised that required a fifth amendment, but there you go. And then project 5, that's on page 29. This is the last project, is the East Central Rail Trail from Kingman Road to the Volusia County line. This project was actually already in our TIP. However, the fund code changed. The funding came from the regional trails box, and the fund code RED stands for the regional trails funding. And so that funding was switched out. The project is now going to be managed by the DOT, so this is state money instead of Brevard County, so it's not going to be a LAC project. So they wanted to make that change in the work program. And the only other change that we will need to make to this particular step is the Federal Transit Administration has required that we produce an annual listing of transit projects for which federal funds have been obligated in the preceding year. And when I say obligated, basically that means Federal Highway has given approval for Space Coast Area Transit to actually spend the money. These projects are already in our TIP under the section said called Transit and Transportation Disadvantage Projects. However, they would like us to put them in a table in the very back of the TIP along with our other federally obligated projects, so they will kind of be in a table by themselves. So this is something that they requested, and these are going to be the amendments that we are going to make to our currently adopted TIP. So we are asking for approval of Resolution 15-15 amending the fiscal year 15 through 19 TIP.
Thank you. Is there a motion? A motion by Ms. Wilbanks, second by Ms. Lamb. Any comments or questions from the TAC? Seeing none, we need to proceed.
Comments or questions from the CAC?
Thank you. From the TAC, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Thank you. Our next item is the revised legislative agenda. Rob?
Good morning. You have the revised legislative agenda at your place. There are just two additions. On the third bullet, under support passenger rail in Brevard, we have added the sentence, continue state investment in quiet zones as passenger rail is expanded. You may recall that the legislature budgeted $15 million for quiet zones, or $10 million for quiet zone matching funds last year. Those funds have all been allocated, and we will be entering the quiet zone process over the next few months. We would like the legislature to budget money again so that we can apply for it. So that is the reason for that addition. On the back page, the second bullet is new. Fund regional trails that expand access to public lands. As you all know, Amendment 1 passed with flying colors, and the legislature will be deciding how those funds are to be used. We've already heard a lot of talk from legislators and read a lot about how there's a general feeling that we don't need to buy any more land. We need to take care of the land that the state already owns. And we need to make it accessible. And one of the ways to make that land accessible is through trails. There is actually language allowing Amendment 1 funds to be used for trails that was in the amendment language. So several groups around the state, the Trails Foundation, the Rails to Trails and other statewide organizations are going to be pushing for up to 10% of Amendment 1 funds to be used for trails and access to public lands. So we are asking to add that and to support that effort. So those are the two changes that we're proposing. Everything else remains the same, and many of these things have been on our list for several years. So I'll be happy to answer any questions about those two things.
One comment to the cities that are looking at quiet zones, you may wish to work with your city councils and your lobbyists on this issue with allocating additional funds for quiet zone match. Make sure that's in your own municipal legislative packages.
Okay, is there a motion from the TAC to recommend approval of the revised legislative agenda for the TPO? Motion by Mr. Claudia, is there a second? Second by Ms. Lang, thank you. Any comments or questions from the TAC? Hearing none?
Comments or questions from the TAC? Whiskers?
Yeah, on item 3, support passenger rail in Brevard. Develop passenger rail stations in Titusville, Cocoa, and Melville. Just for the record, are we asking the state to subsidize these rail stations? And if so, where's the money, where would the money come from?
This was originally put into our legislative agenda several years ago when the state had budgeted $118 million for station development. That's when we were working on the Amtrak line. So they can develop the station itself, just the little platform and, where the train stops, not a big facility. So it would be construction, but we're not asking for the state to subsidize ongoing operations of rail. No, we are not.
So if All Aboard Florida uses the stations or Amtrak, that would not be a subsidy.
No, they would have to pay a rent to use the station that we developed.
And would that cover the cost of the state?
I would hope so. The state can develop the station itself, but for example, in other places, the stations are being developed by the cities, but they're being leased out for retail and office and things like that, with the full expectation that they're going to be privately funded.
I just want to clarify that this will not constitute a subsidy to either All Aboard Florida or Amtrak. Am I correct?
That is correct.
Further comments or questions from the TAC? Mr. Willis?
On this Amendment 1, and I don't know if it's for you, Lee, or Lorena, but the way this amendment was promoted, it would not increase taxes. It gave, I think, a false impression as though there's no consequence to voting for something like this. I think this body's now learning that there is a consequence. $650 is estimated $1 million out of documentary funds this year, and anticipated in the 20th year, you're about $1.3 billion, of revenue that's being diverted. And I'm not getting into the debate about whether that's good or bad. There's somebody's ox is getting gored. And my question is in relation to what we learned today, this TRIP funds, which now appears to be funded through documentary stamps. Is there any sense of right now what kind of consequence this is going to have with the transportation dollars that had been coming through documentary stamps that are now, as a result of the amendment being passed, those dollars won't be there anymore? Anybody got an answer?
I will try to answer to the best of my ability. The reason, it's my understanding that the reason this amendment was placed on the ballot is because documentary stamps were originally developed for 3 specific purposes: for trip, for transportation, local transportation, for land acquisition and preservation, and for affordable housing. So the people of Florida agreed to documentary stamps for those 3 things. However many years ago documentary stamps were implemented. What brought the state to this place of putting this on the ballot was the fact that the legislature didn't use the funds for those 3 things
During a recession.
during a recession.
During a
Yeah. And then there was a very long, there was a period of time. So there were people that were mad about the funds not being used the way they thought they were supposed to be used. There are actually TRIP funds this year available for the first time in many years. So I can tell you that the transportation lobbyists and the cities and the counties and everybody that cares about transportation has a first bullet on their agenda: fund transportation regional incentive program as a priority to make sure documentary stamps are still put on the TRIP program, because it is a concern. We don't want transportation to get unfunded because of this set aside, but it is what it is.
The pie is the pie.
The pie is the
The
pie.
pie is the pie. So if you take that 33% away, my only question was, how does that affect our transportation
Well,
funding?
the point I've been making is that it's not about how do you spend the Amendment 1 set aside.
No.
What the legislature really has to look at is the entire documentary stamp program and where all the money gets allocated, how all the money gets allocated. If a third of it has to go for certain uses that are specified in the constitutional amendment, that affects the rest of the pie. So you can't look at the Amendment 1 proviso in isolation. So, and I hope that is what they plan to do. Clearly with Senator Gardner and Representative Chris Foley in leadership positions, our areas very well represented, and we have access to those folks. So we just have to watch this as it proceeds through the session.
I think I'm not speaking for the TPO or anybody else, it's my opinion that because Amendment 1 passed, I think the legislature will be careful about how they use the other documentary stamps. I mean, clearly if they need it for general revenue, they'll take it for general revenue, which they had to do in recession. But I think that they would want to avoid another amendment from the housing community or from the transportation communities locking them in. So I'm hopeful that they will look at both affordable housing and transportation with the other 2/3 of the documentary stamps, as was originally intended.
Okay, from the TAC, let's go ahead and vote on the motion. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Bob. Next is the authorization to develop an agreement with the Canal Port Authority to conduct a rail station location study.
I think the write-up in the agenda package is pretty good and about as succinct as I could make the situation, which is rather complex, but it is interesting that Albany, Florida has changed a long-standing position of theirs concerning new station development. And probably towards the mid to latter September, began publicly discussing the fact that they may be willing to consider an additional station in Brevard. Notice the wording that's very important. They are willing to evaluate a station. This is not a commitment to build. It is a commitment to evaluate. But what Albany, Florida wants is one location to evaluate. They did not really want to be in the middle of the dialogue between the different jurisdictions over where that location should be. So through a joint cooperative effort between the port and the TPO will actually be conducting a study to select a preferred site, and Port Canaveral will has offered to pay for that study, which should not be too expensive. What we're specifically asking for at this point in time are two things. One is permission to develop a scope of services for consulting services. We propose to use Kittleson Associates, who's done outstanding work for us, knows the county well, a national organization that has resources to draw on from all over the country, and we believe is in a good position to conduct this type of location study. That will involve developing the valuation criteria, looking at vacant properties, access, a whole number of things that you can think of that affect station location. In particular, looking for a location that fits best within the All Aboard Florida business plan and is likely to attract the highest ridership. Once we submit a location to All Aboard Florida, they will then conduct a ridership study, determine an estimate of how many riders may be willing to use that study. Clearly, the more riders, the more attractive the location will be, and the greater the likelihood that the station will actually be implemented by All Aboard Florida. This is not a commuter rail system, it's an interregional rail, and the location criteria are likely different for an interregional system rather than a commuter rail type system. So we have to be sensitive to the nature of the transit system, the rail system we're talking about. So all that gets embodied in the scope of services. The next item is we need to develop an agreement with Port Canaveral whereby we can transfer funding back and forth. We propose to use, in general, the model, the Space Florida contract model that we had, where we're in a contract with the port. We perform the work and then submit invoices back to the port for their reimbursement for consulting fees. Worked very well with Space Florida, and with some tweaking and modifications to make specific to this task. We believe that would work again. What we propose is to, if this is authorized by the TPO on Thursday, we will spend the next couple of weeks finalizing the scope and an agreement to bring it back, both documents to the bodies in February. We will need an amendment to our Unified Planning Work Program to add this additional work task and the funds into our program. Then we'd turn it over to the Canaveral Port Authority for their consideration, and then hopefully we then can get underway. We have to be very careful while All Aboard Florida is engaged in their environmental impact process that we do not jeopardize that. So we are going to be working pretty much on our own without All Aboard Florida involvement until they get a record of decision from the Federal Railroad Administration, which could be about March. So, for instance, we can't call up the All Aboard Florida people and say, what are your station location criteria for a new station in Brevard? If they start looking at, if they assist us in looking at a new station in Brevard, that has to be added into their environmental impact statement, and they almost have to start over. So we'd be very sensitive to our relationship with All Aboard Florida in the meantime. So we are working pretty much on our own here for the time being. I'll be happy to answer any questions. One other point I want to make. The news reports that you may have seen on television or read in the paper in general have been poor. This has not been understood by the reporters. Maybe one got it right, but there is no proposal to run All Aboard Florida service directly to Port Canaveral. That is not what this is about. Clearly, we need to be sensitive to the potential ridership from cruise ship patrons, but the media reports had it looking like we're evaluating running rail service out to the All Aboard Florida rail service to the port. That's not at all what this is.
Okay. Why don't we start with comments and questions, see if anybody has any thoughts on this before we take a motion. Comments, questions? Anything from the CAC?
From the CAC, Ms. Taylor?
I did have one question. Right now, not get the feds right now, not on their approval? Planning, is that planning?
They've received, I think, in aggregate, 8,000 comments that are all now on somebody's desk at the Federal Rail Administration. All that has to be reviewed and determined if there's substantive comments that are raised. I don't believe the issues with the drawbridge in Jupiter have been resolved, so the Coast Guard is still engaged. But what Alworth, Florida is seeking is what's called location, LDCA, Location Design Concept Approval, LDCA. That is the official record of decision on the part of the federal agency granting an okay to move forward with the stipulations and assurances that are contained in the PD&E document. So that is what they're looking for. The schedule that we were told, if everything moves smoothly, that should come forward in maybe March. But that was before the volume of comments was understood. So we'll see what happens. But it's now, the decision now rests with Federal Rail. They have all the public comment, they have the report, and now they're doing whatever they have to do to work through the end game. And the Coast Guard's still engaged too. Federal Rail, there's an understanding between federal agencies that are involved in different aspects of environmental review. There's a lead agency, but there's also other agencies that have comment and coordination rights. And I'm not sure about Federal Rail, but in the federal highway world, Federal Rail would not issue a location design acceptance until they heard from the Coast Guard. The Coast Guard has standing on commenting on water traffic, so they may have to wait for the Coast Guard to resolve whatever it is with the bridge before Federal Rail feels that they're qualified to make a final determination. I don't know that. But there's still moving parts to this that haven't, it's not done yet.
Is the 8,000 for the total, 8,000 comments for the total line?
Yes,
Or
in
not just
aggregate.
for Mark?
No, in aggregate. I think probably 7,500 of them are probably from Jupiter, Stewart. Now, the public meeting that was held in Brevard several weeks ago was very good. It was well attended. It was not overwhelming. We didn't have problems with the fire marshal making people get out of a room like they did further south. But there was good attendance and a mixture, and I thought it was well organized. I don't know. I did not. It's a public meeting for the public, so I just kind of stayed in the back and talked to some of the other people that I knew, and so I'm not sure what the public comment was like.
Okay, so staff is requesting a motion that would recommend the TPO authorize staff to develop a scope of services for an Alworth, Florida station location study and an agreement with Canal Port Authority for reimbursement of TPO study costs. So that's the recommended motion. Motion by Mr. Arnett. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Patio. Any further comments from the TAC? Anything from the CAC?
Comments or questions from the CAC?
Just a question in general. It's always been my understanding that light rail can pay for itself with attractions to Orlando International before. Now, this here segment, this here station, if you do take passengers from Orlando International and you drive them US 1 and dump them off, it creates a big void. So is this a segment for future light rail to continue to board, or you do the station now and you have a section of rail? Is that what the thinking is? That this is just the first segment in a long-range thought? Now they plan?
And thinking about how such a study could be constructed and what some of the evaluation criteria could be. I did find myself chasing my tail in the sense that I think we're looking, they'll evaluate a station, and that means to me it has to fit in with the all Florida business plan. They have to make money. It's not a public subsidized project, it is a profit-making operation. And clearly, if you had a station, say in North Cocoa, that could provide some kind of direct continuation of rail service to the port, that changes the ridership characteristics. But without a station there first, you don't have the opportunity to have that connection. So, which comes first? So, yes, those are kind of unknowns right now.
But that thought is floating out there. It's not on the plan, but the thought is floating out there to have a station strategically located for the future station.
Well, it's no secret that the port has long desired some more high efficiency way to move cruise passengers to the port. And looking at 528 long term, that's not the best, that's not the only solution that's going to work.
I mean, if we're springing out coin, I think there's something back there somewhere that's been there. I don't see all the board Florida being built.
We have had discussions with senior port staff, and they've been very far-reaching and long-term.
Understood.
Further comments or questions from the CAC?
Okay, if not, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, motion carries. Item 13, is being deferred.
At the request of DOT, we will not hear item 13.
And then item 14, local outreach.
I would like to do this if we can.
I'm going to condense.
You please use mine.
This is called doing things on the fly, and I don't want to be the one to go really late. So I think I can shorten it
Okay.
and still give the flavor.
Okay. This is Katrina Morrell, who's the most recent addition to our TPO staff. She's our communications specialist
Yes.
and public outreach.
And what we've done is created a new slideshow presentation that we would like to bring to all the city councils and other groups. And I wanted to give you a sneak peek of that presentation today. So what we're going to do is a really short version of this presentation so you can see what's in it. And I can bring the full version to your local groups. So what we do is we look at the history of transportation planning, starting out with just connecting farms to markets and no state or federal assistance whatsoever. And we're going to skip with 1944 is when the highway system was established. And I wanted to show this particular slide because the whole point of this first coordinated effort in planning was because of a fear of atomic attack. That's really where transportation planning came from. So we can skip forward through history, everything that happens as we start building roads, and we get the TPOs established, and then we come to today, and at the bottom of this slide, you can see how far we've come from just worrying about atomic attack to now all of those things at the bottom of the slide are what we have to include in our transportation planning. And how we do that here at the SCTPO is we have our strategic plan and our 4 goal areas within our plan. So all of those elements are included as we look at our strategic plan and how we go about the planning process. So here we are very special. As you know, we develop everything from sidewalks to spaceports. In fact, we're the only TPO in the nation that's dealing with spaceports, so we're quintimodal. We're working with space, road, air, rail, and sea. So TPOs are required by law for populations with 50,000 or more. So we call these urbanized area boundaries, and here we have the Palm Bay to Melbourne urbanized area boundary and the Titusville urbanized area boundary. And the TPO is really formed with an interlocal agreement between the local governments and FDOT, and our mission is reviewing the policies and plans that involve state and federal funding. So I'm going to skip this section too, but just to show you the intro slide as to how we're organized and with our 3 advisory committees to the TPO board. And so we go into each of those committees and what they do. Hopefully you guys know what you do. And we'll introduce our staff for new members. Is anybody here new, brand new? That needs to know the staff? So I'll text you at the end to see if you remember all those names. You have 2 seconds to say them. And then I'll text you at the end. So we are not in the business of creating traffic jams or sidewalks to nowhere. Our role, as we see it, is improving the quality of life, making things safer, increasing the economic viability within our community. So how do we go about doing that? We do have work products that we want you to be familiar with because these are the lingo that you hear here all the time. And it starts with our UPWP, Unified Planning Work Program. This is really the internal document that has our budget and projects in it. And then this flow chart here shows our external work products that we bring before you. So we talk about the LRTP, the Long Range Transportation Plan, and that has to be consistent with the local comprehensive plan. And then the LRTP then helps determine the project priorities and the projects that are in our TIP, which Georgiana was talking about, the Transportation Improvement Program. And that has to be consistent with the 5-year work program from FDOT. And this is all part of this federal 3C process, continuous, comprehensive, and cooperative. So briefly, the LRTP, we're currently developing the LRTP for 2040. This is the community's vision for where we want to be in 20 to 25 years. We get a lot of public involvement in this. We look at specific projects, how they're going to be funded, short and long-term strategies. And then our project priorities are really important because transportation planning is a bottom-up process that actually begins with the local elected officials. So every spring we actually request projects from the county, from local municipalities. These projects have to be in line with the LRTP. We go through them and prioritize them as long as they're asking for state or federal funding. Again, we don't deal with any local funds, that's to the local jurisdiction. Once we review them, we bring them before our committees and the board. The board then adopts a prioritized list, and that list is forwarded to FDOT for funding consideration. The TIP Georgiana talked about, I don't need to reiterate it. It is adopted every year, and as needed, it can be amended. Our traffic count report gets a lot of use. This is part of our performance monitoring and management program, and it helps us determine project priorities. This information is also used in the State of the System report, which a lot of people are interested in, because it shows you the conditions within the county. And obviously it illuminates where the problem areas are and where we need to address specific projects. And our strategic plan, I think, makes us really unique. That was one of the things that attracted me in particular to this job, is that this organization functions on a tight strategic plan. This directs our work and what we do, and every month we provide you with an update as to where we are. So the other part of this presentation is talking about the projects, and this ties in really well with Lorena's video that she was showing. And this is something we really want people to understand, is the process for how projects come to be. There are 5 steps, and it often takes longer and costs more than people realize. It's not an overnight thing. The first step would be feasibility. It's really, is this project justified? Can it actually happen? Do we have the funding? Can it be maintained? And then we look at the alternatives. So an example would be the State Road A1A multimodal study that's in feasibility right now. We're looking at the constraints and opportunities to making this a really cool multimodal safe corridor. The next step would be our project development and environment studies. Now that we know the project is feasible, we look at what kind of improvement is actually needed. So this looks at the community impacts and the environmental impacts. And if you're not sure where that picture is, that is from
the PD&E for the Viera interchange project. So an example of a project in this phase would be the proposed interchange at I-95 and Ellis Road connecting with the St. John's Heritage Parkway. And what's really cool about this is it would create a direct connection to the Melbourne International Airport. Step 3 is where the project details are ironed out and we get a set of construction plans. And design phase right now, we have the widening of State Road 528 to 6 lanes, which would create greater access to and from the port. Step 4 is right-of-way, the acquisition of land, and this can make or break the project because it is the most expensive part of the project. An example would be the widening of Babcock from Alvar Road to Palm Bay Road. There's $17 million over a 3-year period set aside for the right-of-way along this road. Final step is construction, and the crews must maintain traffic flow for residents and visitors as they do the construction, and landscaping is also part of this phase. And we mentioned earlier about trails. The East Central Florida Rail Trail is in the construction phase right now, and this is part of that larger coast-to-coast trail which goes across the state. So the cost is very expensive, but for every $1 spent on transportation, there is a $5 return. And where does the money come from? It comes from, for projects, 3 main sources: state and federal gas tax, vehicle registration fees, and tolls. Again, we're only dealing with state and federal money. And just to show you the kind of money we're dealing with, for Brevard this year, there's $190 million in state and federal funding that's coming through. Here's an example of a project that went through all 5 phases. Babcock and 192, it entered the priority list prior to 92. Construction began this year. The cost for right-of-way was $18.5 million, whereas the cost for construction was $6.5 million. So the last part of the presentation is about public involvement, which is where I come in, and it all begins with our public participation plan, which is adopted every 3 years. This outlines our communication tools and strategies and how the public can get involved. We do have a new website. I hope everyone has looked at it. We also have a new newsletter. The first month just went out, so you should have gotten that. And we're very active on social media, and we do a lot of community outreach, and we'll be doing more community outreach as we move forward. So this is our new website, if you haven't looked at it. I want to call attention to you that arrow is pointing to the newsletter sign up at the top of the homepage. It's also in the big green box on every page after this. This is where you can sign up for the e-newsletter. So we, as committee members, signed you up already, but please let your colleagues and constituents know to come here to sign up as well. If you're looking for your agendas on the home page at the bottom, this box on the right here has the most recent agenda and minutes. You can also get to it by clicking the little lead box at the top of every page. That takes you here where you see all the agendas on the right-hand column. And you note that this all matches our strategic plan. Also on the lead page is the member orientation guide highlighted in yellow, and this is a great resource for new and returning members. And of course, here's our social media, Facebook and Twitter. And I can't believe I just did that fast. Look at that, it's 12 o'clock. That's pretty awesome. So what I want to point out to you is, of course, there's more to this presentation than I was able to show you today. But we do want to bring this to your groups and your city councils, and what we will do is actually tailor the presentation to your specific audience and to your geographic area. So if it's, Melbourne, we will put Melbourne projects in the presentation. And on this table here, there is a sign-up sheet that we ask you to take with you, fill it out, and turn it back in so that we can schedule these presentations. And the reason we're pushing this is because this was in our strategic plan, where it was asked by the committees that we do a new community outreach program, which resulted in my position. So this is a direct action out of the strategic plan. Are there any questions?
Any comments or questions from the TAC? Okay, thank you very much. Great job. Susie? Okay. Thanks. Bob, staff report?
We have a strategic plan for you your perusal, and there was something else I wanted to say. Oh, yes. We included the CAC attendance, which unfortunately the last two meetings we've not had quorums for CAC. And the point I want to make is that the CAC members are appointed by the TPO members, and there will be turnover and transition on the TPO. So it may be worthwhile for you to communicate back with your appointing member. And if you wish to continue, express your interest in continuing. Many times the elected officials will be searching for interested people to appoint to various committees. And if you have an interest and good attendance record, etc., they may very well appoint you again. And I think that's probably happened with several of you. But now is the time. The transition period is closing in terms of TPO membership. We finally got the Palm Bay members. Today, I think, is when or Friday, whenever, we finally got the membership, the appointees. So Trey Holton, who used to be sitting down there all the time on the CAC, is going to be up in the big chair with the TPO on Thursday. He's going to be one of the Palm Bay representatives. So that's all I have for Steve. There was no meeting in January.
Okay, anything else for the TAC?
Well, I do want to make a very important point that our attendance comes from the sign-up sheets. So if you attended a meeting but didn't sign in, we're not going to have you shown. Okay, so you may all know that, but I want to emphasize again, be sure and sign in.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, because it's our committee that's not made quorum the past two sessions, I have a couple of suggestions, Bob, beyond us trying to contact TPO members to, I've counted, there's 25. County commissioners get 2 apiece to appoint, and then depending upon the cities and the other groups, they get 3, 2, 1 appointees, total of 25 here. So our quorum would be 10? Okay. And we're not
We
making...
lowered the quorum for both groups 2 years or so ago.
And we're not making that
We're not
quorum,
getting
Mr. Chairman. And so my suggestion, in addition to just getting those TPO members to appoint, because there's a number of vacancies that they have available, so to expand the total number, is that one, could be done very easily because you have our email addresses, is to request a response as far as our attendance. So you get a proactive effort to inquire whether that member is going to participate, because there are in some cases alternates that could then be made aware of that their attendance would be not just a bystander, but an active member of the committee. And that you do this before you send out the hard packages, so you don't have the mailing costs. But then you may have a sense of who you send that physical document out to. And I would suggest that staff may raise this issue in its presentation to the TPO this week, to emphasize that beyond us being tasked to go to those TPO members, because I think we're missing something here. If we're not able to, as the citizens, to make active recommendations because we don't have a quorum.
Well, thank you for your suggestion. It's very good. We've not done a quorum call for TAC in the past. We may need to do that. I do intend to talk about reminding the members, particularly the new members, about their CAC appointments at the meeting on Thursday. And I think maybe I can add a few comments based on what you said and my experience here about the desirability of having members who are committed to actually attend.
Following up on what he was saying, presentations that may occur, or that will occur, in local municipalities, that we have here, that perhaps come out as a incorporation to make sure that we do have a COC full representation.
I noticed a couple months ago, you had posted or you had included in the package, the attendance. I think you do that at least once a year. We did that at various times. And I noticed that one of the Melbourne members hadn't been showing up at all. And I took that to our directors meeting, and we sort of put a search out, got word out that we contacted the person to see if they were still interested in being in it. And then we started the search process to get someone to be on this meeting. I think is that on this next agenda for a new appointment for Melbourne. I know our council passed that recently, but
I know we have one for Rockledge. Rockledge has not had an appointment for some time. We actually understand there were some folks that went to the city of Rockledge and asked if they could get engaged.
But
So
it
we've
didn't
had
come
that.
from Melbourne. I know our council voted on it, but I'd just like to urge the other cities to sort of take a look at that and we go through our system clerk's office. But we got that rolling so that we can try to have
I
it.
appreciate that. Yeah, normally we publish the attendance for both CAC and TAC in the February package based on the entire calendar year, but I felt it would be more timely at this meeting because of the potential new membership and assisting them in identifying active members and where there may be some soft spots. Carol, do you recall, do we have CAC appointees from Melbourne this time around? I don't remember that. No.
We
Okay.
got several at the last minute.
Okay.
One thing from my side, I've been sitting here kind of chewing on this the whole meeting, perhaps I should send a letter through the organization to the CAC members, basically saying, hey folks, we haven't had a quorum for the last 2 meetings, please consider showing up. I'll be a little more diplomatic than that, but
Well, I wonder about people who get an agenda package in the mail and then have never been to a meeting. What do they think when this shows up and stuffed in their mailbox? Doesn't it say something about, why am I getting this, or I'm supposed to be doing something? But
I mean, look at page 93. I mean, there's so many zeros, on that column that they never show up. Never show up. We've got 3 that got perfect attendance. Clarence, Peter, Sandra, that's it.
Okay, ready to move on? Okay. Local government report?
one thing I do want to point out is that bids were received for the construction of the county's portion of the parkway from Palm Bay city limits to US 192. Those bids came in the end of October. The low bid was Ranger Construction at $12.2 million, which was about $2 million under the engineering estimate. So that was a good bid price, and was also substantially lower than the other bidders. That project's going to be moving along. You see on the on my report on parkway activities that groundbreaking is scheduled for January 13th. The end of Emerson Boulevard, as I understand, is like 4 o'clock or something times on the list. So, Mr. Willie can go out and break ground on the project I know you and I have been talking about for 25 years.